address, please?
Roseanne Theobald, 4 Bear Road on Martins Pond. While I think sewerage is a great idea for any town, especially when most of the town is septic, I think that you have chosen the absolute worst possible economic time to present this to the town of North Reading. I think most people are having a hard time just trying to get by day to day, and it really is a shame because I do really believe that it's a good idea. So I have 2 questions. So if you do present this to town meeting and it doesn't pass, would you have a chance to present it again at a future time? Obviously, I know the costs would go up. And then if it should pass, do you have the right, if you are in an area that is going to get the sewerage, do you have the right to opt out because your septic system happens to be working perfectly fine and you've never had an issue with it?
I'll take a crack at the second part of the question, Mark, if you want to think about the first part of the question.
I'll answer.
That's more of a question for you, Bob. Yeah.
The first question, if it were to fail at, let's say, an October town meeting, if that's where the board chooses to place it, we will still pursue this project and bring it to a future town meeting to be determined. We certainly can do that.
The answer to the second part of the question, can you opt out, is a difficult one. One of the things that's very challenging in this is what you started your statement with, which is it's an economically poor time to do this. Unfortunately, it's always an economically poor time to spend a lot of money. And even worse, one of the things that folks can't plan is when their septic system fails. And I think Gary Hunt probably could talk about this endlessly, about the cases in North Reading when people have had their septic systems fail at the worst opportune time. There's never a good time. You can never time putting in a solution to wastewater problems such that it's convenient for everybody. While we would love to come back in a year when everyone's got, excess cash and, things are going great and energy costs are down, I think that the wisdom of the committee right now is that this is the best time to pursue it, and there's some good reasons for that. The problem with the economics is if you start setting up a system where everybody can opt out, you change that payment scale for the people that stay in to the point where it becomes unaffordable for those folks. There's actually very little history on doing what they call checkerboard sewering, which is allowing one property in, one property out. The reason there's no history for it is because the people that opt out, 5 years after they opt out and put the burden of the cost on the people that stay in the project, generally start to have their septic systems fail, and then instead of having them not be able to occupy their property, the Board of Health has to allow them to connect to the sewer anyways, even though they didn't pay their share up front of the cost. So the model that's been set up for that type of a system has shown historically that it doesn't work. The way the process works is you put the sewers in the area, in the neighborhood. When you're allowed to connect in, when it's possible for you to connect in, the town has to make a choice. They have to decide whether they're going to mandate connection or not. Everybody will get that betterment payment that gets sewered. If you get sewered and you have a connection available to your property, you'll pay the betterment. You don't necessarily have to connect, which means you don't necessarily have to pay user charges. You don't have to pay to connect. You can stay on your septic system. What that does is it takes into account the fact that when your septic system fails, you will already have a pipe waiting for you. You'll have a benefit. And there's a lot of history on this in the state. There is a benefit to your property to have something other than a septic system that you can rely on for wastewater treatment. And so that history basically equates to this term that we use, betterment. It means that your property's bettered whether or not you've actually physically connected. And that's the wisdom behind saying you have to pay the betterment portion, or at least start paying the apportioned portion of the betterment over 20 years, whether or not you choose to connect. Now, if you choose not to connect, you can still defer some of the other costs, and obviously that is an individual decision, and it'll be up to the town to make some of those decisions.
Yeah, the other thing to point out is that Mark talked about the average cost of the betterment in contrast to replacing the conventional system. Based upon my experience, that 19 grand would about replace a gravity flow Title V system with no bells and whistles. The irony is if you're in a stressed area, you can't put in a gravity flow Title V system with no bells and whistles and be compliant usually, so it'll cost you more. Those raised systems that I talked about on Elm Street probably didn't cost $15,000 or $20,000, so your out-of-pocket expense when your system fails, and usually it can be an emergency. May of '06, for example, a lot of systems failed. Everybody knows why. They're underwater. So you don't know. You have to come up with 50 grand or 40 grand because now you're in a public health situation. So that's the other flip side of the coin. And the other thing to keep in mind, and I'm certainly the most sensitive to the bad economic times, but we've got a lot of converging factors here that are really forcing us to bring this project forward. You know, the Gutierrez property, Lincoln Properties money, all the commercial properties on 28. If we pass on those for a number of years, those opportunities are going to go away. They'll disappear, and those commercial properties probably won't be developed, and people will have to replace systems on their own as they get stressed and compromised. So that's the downside.
And I guess I would just echo that as well in terms of the why now. The committee as a whole has seen any number of the properties that we're looking to include go out on their own. The half of the Lincoln properties, the half of the Berry property that's been redeveloped, at one point we were potentially in front of them, looking for them to become one of our customers. Obviously, the more customers and that type of customer we have, spreads the cost over a larger group and drives the cost down. They're gone. They built their own wastewater treatment plant. If the other half of that property gets developed, they're likely looking at, rather than being a customer of the town, building their own wastewater treatment plant. Walmart's looking to develop out on Route 28 and expand their system. They're looking at building their own small treatment plant. The post office at one point was looking to, they were partnering with us. They actually went ahead and built their own treatment plant a number of years ago. We've all seen the Shaw's Plaza. We've all seen what's behind the Horseshoe, and many of you probably have seen, some of our own members have the systems in their own yards that they've had to spend significant amount of monies to get those systems in. And, the costs aren't going to go down. You're absolutely right about that. The costs aren't going to go down. We are sensitive that this is not the right time. The town decided back in the 70s when there was 90% matching money that it wasn't the right time as well. So it absolutely is never going to be the right time for this. It's full, we're starting from zero. We have zero sewer, and we're looking to go to 100% for a portion of the town, and it's absolutely a high cost.
Yeah, I just want to also point out that there's a time lag here too. I mean, we're talking about going to the town meeting in October or maybe later and getting some of these questions resolved, and you have an override vote. I mean, the point at which you're going to have to shell out that $20,000 or begin paying in increments on that is still a ways away. So I don't have a crystal ball. I'm not going to sit here and say economic times are going to be better then than they are now, but they're certainly going to be different in one way or the other. And the longer we wait, you're just pushing that window further and further away, but you're not guaranteeing that anybody's going to be in better or worse financial shape. So I say do it now and get it done.
Well, again, I still support this conversion, but you've maybe got 100 people in this room. How do you plan to reach out? How do you plan to market your program? How do you plan to get to the masses to convince them that this is the way to go? Because talking to 100 people, and I would guess most of you all live around Martin's Pond, how do you plan to market this to the rest of the town to sell your wares?
I take that as a question, and Mark, you want to answer that, or?
Part of the strategy is to try to get as many people into this project and knowledgeable about it as possible. The worst thing from our standpoint, or the committee's standpoint, is to have an uneducated on the project group of people come in to vote on it, because obviously it's $91 on my tax bill that I'm not receiving any benefit for? That's an easy no. We're actually going to be looking to have someone come in and give us some professional advice in terms of marketing. That the charge of the wastewater committee wasn't so much to market this project, it was to develop a plan, bring it forward for consideration. We've had a lot of feedback from people that you need to market this in terms of what the potential benefits to the town are. Really wasn't our charge, but we're looking to team with other people to help get that message out there. Obviously, a lot of you probably are hearing most of the details that you've heard tonight right now. You haven't followed this process over the 6 or 7 years, and it is tough. It's not an interesting concept, if you will, it's sewers, okay? Who wants to hear about sewers over the summer as we move forward? It's going to be a difficult task to get that message out.
But like anything, if you want the masses to agree with you, you need to sell your project. Sitting in a hot room.
Look, I'm going to ask everybody that wants to speak through the chair, that'd be me, and to try to give everybody a fair chance, okay? And I recognize this woman sitting down front here.
Question. Janice Curran, 43 Chestnut
Ma'am?
Street.
I recognize this
Oh,
woman.
I'm sorry.
Karen O'Neill, 40 Lindor Road. Kind of to that point, I was wondering if anybody had taken a stab about calculating the projected increased revenue from commercial properties that, there's this vague mention of you feel there'll be a benefit for commercial properties like Teradyne's and Walmart's. Now, that could help offset that, $91 that people who aren't getting any benefit. Does anybody have any idea at all what they think that would be and how that might be folded back into the cost projections?
I'll try it. I think you could ask every member of the committee, and we're certainly not the financial experts, but you could probably get 10 absolute planning experts and ask them that question and get 10 separate answers on it. Just as the question with what's going to happen with the economy going forward, how quickly are those properties going to turn over? Certainly more quickly if we have sewer than if we do not. But it's a difficult question, and we've been extremely conservative on that. What you saw tonight is we're not projecting to use the growth in the community to pay for the project because we're setting ourselves up for failure. If that growth doesn't occur, how does the town then deal with that costing issue? It's potential that, the growth could be used. There is an actual, it's called tax increment financing, where the gross in the tax base is used to pay for projects. We certainly haven't proposed that because we're not comfortable getting out on that limb, if you will.
If you follow the budget process of the past year, it was very clear that in order for us to maintain our schools and our public services, we need to identify new sources of revenue. We have some unique opportunity with some of the undeveloped or poorly developed commercial properties, especially along Concord Street, access to 93. If you look at those communities that have access to 93, if you look at the commercial developments there, right, because they had sewer, and they could provide sewage or treatment plants or whatever, those communities have gained. I think the example that Mark made, a 5-to-1 ratio in the value of property, trucks versus high-end office space, you will see, and it's not going to happen tomorrow, if we have sewer, over the long term, the goal here is to grow a commercial base. It's currently somewhere between 10 and 11%. We'd like to get it up to 20 or 25%. That's where we're going to benefit. We have to make an investment now to reap a benefit in the future. It's not going to come overnight. In other words, we're not going to do this, the $99 that we've invested, we're going to get payback in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 years. But if we look out 6 years and beyond, we'll start to see that benefit. So, I think that answers that aspect of the question. You were next, and then a woman.
Janice Curran, 43
sorry,
Chestnut Street. Have you given any thought to who would run this treatment facility? Would it be the town, or would it be a private operating service like Aquarian or OMI or Veolia or United Water?
Well, thank you for answering the question. It would come under the Department of Public Works. We would do a contract ops.
Okay.
We're not interested in getting bigger over that. We'd have our utilities, our water folks that are under Mark be cross-trained to some degree, but the actual day-to-day operations would contract ops that right out.
Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Delaney, and then the woman.
My view of this project, from what I know,